Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packet Bomb live stream experience, coming at you live from San Francisco, California, where we've had a bit of a challenge lately. We're going to talk about that. Got a great show for you today. Exciting guest. We're finally doing a giveaway, which please look down below the video. You have to click on the link and sign up so that we know who's the contestants are and who can win the book that we're going to talk about. And we'll do that towards the end, but you have to be live and confirm in the chat that you're here. Otherwise we draw again. So let's see, what have I been talking about? I've been talking about being stuck in a tiny apartment in downtown San Francisco for 6 months. I don't really get out much because I live on the edge of the Tenderloin, if you know what that means. If you don't, you can go look it up. So I try not to get out too much. It's not really a stroll around neighborhood so much. Just I run errands. When it's small, and my kid is doing school from here because schools are closed, and I'm kind of going crazy. So I've been talking about how looking apartments. Tons of them are coming on the rental market here in San Francisco. Prices are coming down, though they're still insane compared to most places. But happy to announce, last week signed a lease, moving at the end of the month to more space. I'll have an actual bedroom and an office. Imagine that. And it's right across the street from a park with like a wooded park too, like natural looking, which, as a boy from Mississippi, that's what I need to reset, to breathe. And I'm really excited. There's also tennis courts right across the street, which I like tennis. I've been enjoying watching the US Open. So I'm excited about that. Otherwise, here in San Francisco, oh boy, I woke up to the strangest thing on Wednesday, and let me see if I can share this with you. See if this works. You can see that, right? So this is purple air. This is the, I think if you get an air quality monitor, it can feed into this service. And if you may notice a particular bad spot here on the West Coast. So yeah, today particularly is bad. I can smell it inside my place. Kind of slight headache, a little nauseous. So, having a great day. It's pretty rough. And let me show you, let me turn on the audio here for a second so that it comes through. This is legitimately what San Francisco looked like on Wednesday at like 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon. I mean, it looks like it's out of a movie, but this is real. I mean, minus the mood music, Blade Runner, whatever you want to call it, Mars, I don't know, but this is not an exaggeration. I mean, spooky. It was just insane, to be honest. I had an early morning meeting. I woke up and it was still dark. I was like, yeah, the days are getting shorter, whatever. And then I got in the meeting, and then it was done at like 8 o'clock when it's plenty daylight. And I realized it's still really dark in my apartment. So it's not like that now. It's still, obviously, the air quality is so bad that, it's still very hazy, but it's not orange anymore. So I'm grateful for that. And we've had a heat wave, a couple heat waves now. I think I may have talked about it last live stream. So you have to keep your windows closed, and we don't have ACs in San Francisco. That's just not a thing. Which growing up in Mississippi is hard for me to fathom, because that life is all about running from one air-conditioned space to the other. At least there's no humidity. Yay. So today on the live stream, as I mentioned, we're gonna branch out a little bit. I'm gonna get out of my comfort zone. We're not gonna really focus on wireshark and packet analysis. Yeah, we'll talk about it, but we're really focusing on security, intrusion detection, honeypots, something that I know a little bit about, but not a ton. So, it's good. You got to get out of your comfort zone, people. If you're going to grow, if you're going to improve, it doesn't happen in your comfort zone. So I think this will be a fun conversation. Talk to Chris. And like I said, sign up at the bottom with the link if you want a chance to win the book. And I know it's just like a WordPress plugin that does a random generation of people who enter it. So I know a lot of you in the live chat. So if one of your names comes up, I didn't, it's out of my hands. It's the randomness of software. So with that, I think we're ready. Let me check all my settings. I guess the audio is okay, right? You guys will let me know. We had a little problem with that last time. And honestly, we've had super smooth dress rehearsal and checking things. So I expect this to be a train wreck. So I'm just ready for it. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest today, Chris Sanders. There he is. I didn't do this fancy transition. Well, I want to start with...
Wait a minute, am I not worth the fancy transition?
You know what? Hold on. I turned it off when I changed the thing. Here we go. We're going to try again. Take 2, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Chris Sanders. There we go.
Beautiful. I'm so happy to be here. I feel so...
I wanted to start with a classic American tune that I heard a lot growing up that I think is appropriate for today, but it goes like this. Happy, happy birthday from Applebee's to you. We wish it was our birthday so we could party too. Hey. Right? Is that today? I saw it.
It is today. It is today.
Oh no. Oh no. They're saying the audio is bad. Hold on, let me check. Okay, same problem as before. I think what I did last time was I'm going to turn this up. I'm going to turn your off and this off. Okay. Let me check the audio again. Chris, give us some audio.
Yeah, so here's some audio. Thank you for the kind birthday song. It was embarrassing, but appreciated.
All right. That is better. I'm going to turn off the background music because it's choppy. We just did this test, Tuesday?
We don't need background music. Worst comes to worst, you can just sing for us some more.
I will do that if it comes to it. All right, chat music off. That is the background. Okay, can I get a thumbs up from folks? All right, so audio's good now. Yeah, we just did a test on this week. We actually streamed live just to make sure. So here we are. Maybe it's because my daughter's on her class again. I think this is more important than her education, so maybe I should pull her out of school. Anyway, okay, so I think we're good now. Yes, well, happy birthday. I really liked what you put on Twitter, what you asked for people, I think is like some unconventional wisdom, things they've learned in their life. Is that right?
Yeah, and I do this. I've done this really kind of for the past few years, and I just like learning unique things from people. So that's just what I ask for, like for my birthday, for my followers on Twitter and on LinkedIn as well. Tell me some unconventional wisdom. It can be literally about anything. And I've been like reading them throughout the morning. I've gotten looks like 60 or 70 of them at this point, and they're all over the place, and I absolutely love every bit of it.
What's some good gems in there you can share with us?
Oh gosh, they're scrolling almost too fast for me to read. Somebody said, I liked my buddy Kurt said something about when you're in life, like something about when you're fine if one thing goes wrong, but when 3 things goes wrong, that's usually when there's a problem. He used to live on a boat, and that was like his thing, and so that makes sense. Somebody made a note about take time to write handwritten letters. That's people appreciate that. Someone said, always have a spare AA battery on hand. You never know when you'll need one. And since I have a child now, that is very true, because when that one toy they want to play with, the batteries die.
No, that's absolutely.
So gosh, it's just so much good stuff.
Absolutely. I taught my daughter that lesson very early on. When she got old enough, I forget, let's call it 5 years old, we started, an allowance. And we went one day to Target. I let her pick out a thing, like a toy. I think it was the fishing game where it spins, you try to catch the fish.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, it's this much money. You need to save this much more. She said, okay. So we set a goal, few weeks later, she had the money. We went, just enough money. We went and bought it, came home, opened it up, and it wasn't going to work because it didn't have batteries, and she didn't have enough money for batteries. And then I took a picture of her face holding it up and how sad she was. But luckily, Dad had batteries on hand. But yeah, so it's a lesson best learned early.
Yes.
So, all right. So I was looking very much forward to meeting you at Shark Fest last year in Berkeley. Unfortunately, work got in the way, and so our paths did not overlap. But now I'm glad that we're having this chance to get to know each other here in front of everyone. So that's how we do it these days. So, as I like to do with people, like talk about their background. I think you said you grew up in Kentucky, off the plains, the fields, or the rolling hills of Kentucky. What was your high level path from a boy from Kentucky to being a security and packet expert and author and et cetera?
Sure. So it's kind of a weird story, and it kind of begins. And bear with me here. It kind of begins when my cousin Billy built a meth lab.
Oh.
That's as many stories do. But
I think I saw that TV show.
My cousin Billy built a meth lab. He was doing a lot of things with distributing drugs that you shouldn't do, and as often happens, he got caught, and he went to prison. And he went to prison. He deserved to go to prison for some of the things he was doing. But while he was there, he took a computer class because they had those continuing education classes.
Right.
He came home. He was kind of on house arrest, living with my aunt at the time. And so it was my aunt, so I was there from every now and then, and he was doing computer stuff, and I was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And I was really drawn to that. He was doing stuff, he was doing a lot of game stuff, like he was fixing them and repairing them for people, also playing games. And of course, I was interested in the games.
Sure.
So that really got me hooked on it. And we grew up in poverty. I couldn't afford a computer, but I was able to eventually hobble together one from just parts and things.
Right.
And it was just an interest for me. And when it broke, I had to fix it because we couldn't afford to pay anybody to fix it. And Billy soon found himself back in prison. So he couldn't fix it.
Right.
And that was kind of the start of it. I got decent at working on them. My school district noticed that I was good at it, and they needed someone to help them with computers.
Right.
So they basically said, we're going to give you school credit to help us work on our network, and you can get out of class.
Hey.
And that progressed until my senior year of high school. I only had one class all of senior year.
Because you were the IT guy?
Yeah, and I was their IT guy. And
yeah.
That was awesome. I got a ton of the practical experience. Education networks are notoriously tricky to administer and tricky to secure as well.
Yeah.
So that was kind of trial by fire, and it's lucked out that I wanted to go to college but couldn't afford to go to college. The school district said, well, why don't we just hire you full time as an administrator? They didn't have one at the time. They were using consultants. And I said yes. So I was the network administrator of my school district. And a lot of my people who were my teachers were now my peers, and some of them even worked for me in various roles, which was weird but interesting. That's where I also got into security. I deployed the Snort intrusion detection system in one of its early beta forms. When you deploy an IDS on a network that's never had one before, particularly in education, you see things that you can't unsee.
Yeah.
And that was frightening, but it also got me hooked on the investigative side of things.
Yeah.
And that was really it. And that allowed me to go to college and get a foothold in the industry. And it's, a whole lot of interesting things since then, I guess.
No, that I will say, I ask everyone this question, and everyone has a different answer, a different path, right? I mean, of course, it makes sense, but that is definitely the most unique. A meth bust getting you on the path that you're on today. I similarly was not in high school, but in college, an administrator for the school later. And you see things. We had these, at the time we had these 4 Marconi switches. They were Ethernet to the edge, but ATM uplink. Anyway, and I was just kind of learning Ethereal, as it was called, but there was another one that all it did was sniff your traffic and post any kind of picture format just randomly on the window. And our switches, they leaked. Like, I could see other traffic I wasn't meant to see. And on a Friday afternoon, when I was showing my boss this interesting tool and how I could see other people's traffic, someone was browsing places they shouldn't have in the office. And that was awkward with my boss Friday afternoon. So, yeah. All right, so yeah, you were there. You were doing the keynote. I did watch it. I thought it was really fantastic. And one of the things that has always interested me is, how we learn, how we become troubleshooters. I mean, my opinion is sometimes certain people have a mindset that's better suited to it. Some people don't, but in this industry, we all have to know a little bit, and we're always having to learn new stuff. As I mentioned at the top, getting out of your comfort zone. How do you tackle some big topic? How do you approach learning? And you talked about learning mental models. I think you said you this was your research thesis or studies in school.
Yeah, so this is I'm working on my doctorate right now. I'm mid dissertation, and it's kind of a blend. It's a little bit of a unique deal. It's part psychology. I'm applying it in the field of cybersecurity, but it's ultimately going to be a doctorate in education.
Right.
'Cause that's the way most of this stuff manifests for me. But this is kind of my focus area, and it has been for the last few years. Is just trying to better understand how we learn and why we learn and the things that make us learn better. And that also feeds into the security side as well, because when you think about this notion of you have some type of maybe an IDS alert and you want to investigate it to figure out what happened, well, that's really learning.
Right.
It's just a smaller, more narrowly defined version of it. So there's just a lot of application universally across all that.
Sure. Sure. So what can you talk about maybe some examples or models that you think are helpful or useful for us to apply or learn about or think about for
Yeah.
learning?
So, one of the things I've been working with a lot lately is this notion of cognitive load theory. And it's a pretty well established thing. And it basically says, and most of us have heard of this before, that memory is organized kind of in three structures. We have kind of our sensory memory, which is, sight, smell, touch, sound, and that kind of it goes away almost instantly.
Yeah.
Then we have short term memory and we have long term memory. Computer folks tend to get those pretty well because it's kind of like, RAM and disk, right?
Yeah.
RAM is what we're actively working on. That's
Yeah.
short
Yeah.
term or working memory. And ROM or disk is the long term stuff. And it's really working memory that, well, it's where all of our work happens. It's where we solve the security investigations. It's where we solve network problems. We take all these variables and shove them in there. And cognitive load theory basically says that working memory is limited and we can only fit a certain number of things in there.
Right.
So a lot of what defines success or failure in anything we do that's cognitively challenging, whether it's troubleshooting or security or whatever, is how well you effectively manage that load.
Mm.
And there's only so much of that we can do ourselves. Like we really depend on our tools to facilitate that. I'll tell you, we've got a pretty Wireshark centric audience here. There's a reason I think why Wireshark's interface hasn't really changed dramatically since the ethereal days. Like there's all kinds of new features, but it's still those three windows and you
Yeah.
move them around a little bit. But it's because it gives you the right information on the screen at the right time without having to go and open a bunch of different tabs and move things around and hold something in working memory while you're looking at something else. You click
Right.
on one packet, you get the stream there, you get the details there, you get the bytes at the bottom. It just works.
Yeah.
And you know, I would say, and Gerald's not obviously here. I would say he might not have known about cognitive load theory when he did that, but he probably knew this is the right information on the screen at the right time.
Yeah. Right.
So our tools really facilitate that a lot, and a lot of success is dictated on this notion of managing cognitive load and how many things can fit in working memory at once.
I imagine a lot of people, most of us, maybe sort of intuitively have a grasp of that, and we sort of understand what that is for ourselves. But I don't know that I specifically, intentionally approach learning in that way. And okay, I've been doing this thing, approaching it that way. So if I'm context switching to a new topic to learn, and how how am I going to approach that? How am I going to document or structure the stuff that I was learning so that I can retain the most valuable bits and access it quickly, whether it's in my head or in my own personal notes or something. But I think that's a good way to think about it.
Well, and think too. One of the things that's important about cognitive load theory is working memory capacity is kind of biologically limited.
Mm.
And they say the average person can fit about 7 things in working memory, plus or minus 2. So between 5 and 9 things. Some people are closer to 5, some people are closer to 9. What constitutes a thing is a bit complex and can vary. It could just be a number, it could be a name. We create simplifying strategies and so on. But the kind of key here is that you're kind of born with it. Whatever that limitation is,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to change it. Now you can do some mnemonics things and try to fit extra things in there in that way. But for the most part, you can't change it. And I think it's important to recognize that. It's important to recognize what your ability is. I'm a little bit lower on that end of that 5 to 9 spectrum. Does that mean I'm a bad analyst or going to be bad at security? No, it just means I have to compensate for it using other
Right.
strategies. And I
Right.
would say to a lot of people, like if you're listening to this and you think, oh, wow, yeah, I'm not very good at keeping a lot of things in working memory once, and maybe that's why I'm bad at this. That doesn't mean you have to be bad at it. You mentioned note taking, right? That is how I overcome a lot of this. Is I just actively take notes when I'm doing investigations a lot more aggressively than some other folks do it.
Right.
And the key is I do it kind of from the bat all the time, because by the time you realize you should have been taking notes, you've already forgotten things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, there's
And
an entire industry around this, right? I mean, was it OneNote or Evernote?
Evernote,
I mean, Tim Ferriss, he always asks his people like what are the details? How are you doing when you read a book? How do you take notes? How do you track this information? Because no one can keep it all. There's tons of interest, like a whole industry around that. You did mention I have written QFT. What is that, and how is it useful?
yeah. So a lot of investigations boil down to this fundamental skill of asking good questions. And my analysis, if not my life mantra, is that a question well stated is a problem half solved.
Yeah.
So the idea is if you have some type of investigative input, which you pretty much always do, you have something that led you into the investigation, you use that to form a good question, and then you pursue evidence to kind of build out a timeline of what happened. So I call this process called diagnostic inquiry. It's the baseline investigation method that I teach. And the QFT is basically, it stands for question formulation technique, and it's a method for getting better at asking investigative questions.
Mm.
So basically the premise is this, is that you have some type of input. For security folks, that's generally an IDS alert or something of that nature, something you've observed, this thing happened at this time. And then you sit down and you take a step back and you say, what are all of the questions I could ask to further this investigation and figure out what happened?
Right.
And then you make a list of them, and you do it very, very quickly. You don't stop to think about them or evaluate them or rank them. You just kind of write them down as they come to you over maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So, maybe you end up with 5, 10, 20, 30 questions. And you do that really, again, it's really more about quantity than quality at this point.
Interesting.
And then once you set aside a specific time for that, or just wait till you can't think of anything else. And then you take a step back for a second, get your Zen, and then focus back in and start going through them. And then you
Right.
systematically pick your 2, 3, 4, 5 best questions. I recommend usually about 3. Pick the best ones.
Right.
Now you're using a bit of a different strategy. What you were using was called divergent thinking, creating that big list. Now you're using convergent thinking, which is picking the best things. 2 different skills, cognitively different. Some people are going to be better at one than
Right.
the other. The divergent thinking is really more associated with creativity, whereas convergent thinking is more associated with what we think of when we think of traditional intelligence that would be measured by like an IQ test or something like that.
Right.
You need both of them. And if by doing this exercise, and particularly doing it in groups with other people where you can kind of feed off of each other,
Yeah.
you inherently get better at asking questions. And it also has a nice side effect bonus. You do this enough times and you write down your good questions, you've kind of inherently developed some investigative playbooks that you can use.
Right. And I've heard a similar approach for, in the business world in terms of being generating new ideas for businesses and things like that, that every day, wake up, whatever, write down 10 ideas, and they don't have to be good, but the developing the muscle to be able to bang out 10 ideas or 10 questions, is that something you can develop with practice?
Yeah, I think so. I think, thinking creatively begets more creative thinking.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're able to optimize, you mentioned like waking up in the morning and doing it. So like we all have periods of the day where we're more creative than others. There were 2 people who actually shared a technique. It was Salvador Dali, and I believe it was Benjamin Franklin, who would at night, because they were more creative at night. Their mind was a little bit more freer.
Mm-hmm.
And they would sit with a notebook next to them in their chair with a big ball bearing in their hand. And they would just kind of start to fall asleep. And when they fell asleep or got to, they would drop that ball bearing, it would hit the floor, and they would write down whatever they were thinking of. Which is super valid technique. And I think scientifically, I think most people are a little bit more creative at night when they're trying to go to sleep because there's clearer minds.
Yeah, yeah.
So, taking advantage of that, having pen and paper ready, because you're not going to remember these things otherwise.
No, I think we've all been there. Like you're on the verge of sleep and these ideas come in, and then later you're like, wait, what was it? Was that even a good idea? I don't even remember it. But yeah, having something ready to go, the
Yeah.
ball
And
ball
that's why a
bearing is
lot of
good.
people are big into like meditation. I'm not a big meditating guy, but a lot of people are, and that's their idea time.
Hmm.
Ideas for me, like I'm a shower idea guy. I'm in the
Yeah,
shower, I'm clear head, and that's so I have a notebook everywhere I go. Like
yeah,
I have a couple of them all around, and I just keep a notebook with me no matter what. And if all else fails, I have my notebook or
right,
my phone. But I just like to write stuff down, and not just the broad sense, curiosity out business ideas things, but specifically like to stuff I'm working on and investigation.
right,
One
right.
of the things we found, I did some research with Steph Rand on this that we published last year on this convergent and divergent QFT type thinking, is one of the things people did that caused them to do this divergent convergent thinking is separating themselves physically from the problem. So if they're in
Yes.
an investigation and they're stuck and they can't really get past it, it's going to eat lunch, it's taking a
Hmm.
walk, it's listening to some music.
That's what
It's
I
just
do.
getting that physical
Yeah.
separation, clearing your head. And then when you come back to it, you're a little bit better prepared to take a fresh set of eyes. Also, probably the biggest thing you can do is just sleep. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I can clearly remember solving some really, just being stumped, like knowing the answer's there because you just know it's there, and then just walking to lunch and going, and then I can't wait to get back to the office to verify it in the data. Oh, sure enough, that was it. Yeah, I'm a walker type guy. Um, so let's talk about. I mean, like I said, as you said, this is a pretty good Wireshark audience, but and I talk about this using the right tool for the right job. Even if you're a Wireshark pro, and sometimes it's not the right thing, and I appreciated that you said this in a Wireshark keynote to a bunch of Wireshark people. Like sometimes this is not the right tool for the job. So yeah, talk about your experience in that. What other tools are you bringing to bear in your work?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, my background is in packets. When I first started doing security, I was doing exclusively network-based stuff, looking at packets, looking at packet-related metadata. And yeah, it was. I know it was a little bit of a calculated risk when I got on stage at Shark Fest as the keynote and said, "Wireshark is more often than not the best tool for the job." Now, if someone tells me is it the best tool for the job for looking at PCAP data, I will say yes
Yeah,
most of the time.
yeah,
Sometimes T-Shark or TCP don't, but most of the time Wireshark. But the ultimate idea is, and going back to asking questions, this is the reason you ask a question first.
mm-hmm.
I always tell people if you're just diving into evidence and you can't pause and say, "What am I looking for?"
Right,
then you're at at best wasting time, at worst just completely lost.
yeah,
You should always be able to say, "I'm looking at this evidence because I'm looking for this thing." And it can be okay if it's not very specific. Like you don't have to say I'm looking for this bit or this byte in this specific place, but you should basically at least be looking for evidence of some type of relationship or following some type of hunch. Or again, you're kind of just wasting time. So you let the questions based upon the evidence you already have drive the evidence that you're looking at. If you
right,
do that, well, yeah, sometimes you might end up in packet data looking at PCAP. Sometimes you might end up at, for network data, you might end up looking at something like Zeek logs and looking at that. You may end up on the host side looking at something completely far away from packets. You might be looking at the Windows registry or Windows event logs.
right,
The evidence is not, I mean, evidence is the lifeblood of what we do. It's where we find evidence of relationships and create our timelines, but it is not the primary, we have to ask the right questions. We take the evidence, formulate the questions, use that to figure out what evidence to go to next. And the tools are really ancillary to all of that.
yeah,
And the good thing about that is learning tools is not difficult,
right,
and learning to ask questions is a lot more difficult. Really, the mark for me of a good investigator is the ability to ask good questions, and then for that part, they can really learn any tool, even on the log analysis side, whether it's Splunk versus Elk. Subtly
right.
different tools in a lot of different ways. It doesn't matter for most folks if they know what question they're asking.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And let me take a quick break for our audience. If you've joined us later, please click on the link in the description. We will be giving away Chris's new book at the end of the live stream, but you need to be in the chat to verify you're here to win it. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think as you stated at the beginning of this, well, I think it was like a well-stated problem is a problem half solved. And I've encouraged in my training that spend as much time as you can asking questions. I remember having this epiphany in school, trying to program when I don't I'm not super great with the programming language or whatever it is, but if I know exactly the problem I'm trying to solve, it's so much easier and faster to do it. I think for myself included, nowadays when someone sends me a PCAP and they give me very little information, I'll go look at it. Partly maybe it's hubris. I don't know why I can figure this out. I don't need a lot of information. And then I'm probably spinning my wheels, wasting time. If I would just reply back with a series of questions, then I could cut my time in half of looking at someone's PCAP, most likely.
Yeah. Well, and that's also one of the big problems with some approaches to like challenges and like CTF type things is, it's a little bit different from like a pen testing perspective, but at least on the defensive side, if someone says, here's a PCAP or here's a disk image or something like that, go find out what's wrong. That's not super realistic. There are very narrow circumstances in which that's going to happen in the real world. You almost always have something to go on.
Right.
Not always, but almost always. And, otherwise it kind of gets into that threat hunting realm, which is a little bit of a different deal. That's why, I prefer, like, if you're really doing something for educational perspective, give someone a little bit of evidence and let them build off that, because that's a lot more real world.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about you do training classes. You've got, are these online self-paced or these in-person live? What's the kind of format, and what are you teaching folks?
Sure. So my company is Applied Network Defense, and I founded it, and we're mostly focused on online training, mostly on the defensive kind of blue team side of security. I've been teaching in various forms for a while. I've done, pre-pandemic, I've done live classes for a while. There was a time when I did packet analysis classes live. I don't really do that much anymore. I do like a one-day crash course. I do teach my investigation theory class live from time to time, particularly for like corporate customers. But for the most part, I focus on online training.
Yeah. Are those live online?
No, they're on demand.
Okay.
They're on demand. We do some hybrid stuff where folks, like my investigation theories, designed to be taken over 10 weeks. It's all on demand, but with the hybrid stuff, when companies come in, basically I have a few live sessions scattered in there with them. And then we do, there's some email-based stuff and some discussion board-based stuff, asynchronous as well. So, but for the most part, it's a deal. You go to the website, which you have link there, and there's kind of a number of courses. Investigation theory is my main course, where I pour a lot of the research I've been talking about here into this convergent divergent thought. In that course, the QFT we talked about, you actually participate in one. I give you a list of some signatures. You pick one, you do the first part of the QFT, and I give you feedback. And I kind of help you iteratively build better questions. So it is on demand as far as the videos go, but you're actually interacting with me, and I interact with.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I mean, I think that kind of training, I mean, I've spent a life in tech support, and, a lot of folks who were good at it, they kind of naturally build a framework. They naturally build an approach to do some of this. But some folks, very technically minded, know a lot, but need a little help. And I know there's like, they call it KT training, which that is about troubleshooting approach, but something like this that provides a framework to build upon to approach any issue, investigation, problem solving, troubleshooting. I can't encourage people enough. If that's something you're struggling with, or you're new, you haven't built your own, that's huge value that will impact the rest of your career, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm obviously biased on this, but I tell you, the reason I do a lot of what I do in my career, whether it's writing books, creating classes, all that, the secret is I'm not very smart. And to learn these things myself, I have to break very complex things down very simply and create frameworks of which to approach them. Mental models would be the phrase that I would use. And so if I'm doing that already, like, it makes sense to like share them with people. And that's what practical packet analysis was. That's what investigation theory is. It's all based upon that concept. And I've found out I'm fairly skilled at making complex things simpler. And so if other folks can benefit from that, I'm here for it.
And you mentioned in our previous talks was investigation simulator. Is that that's like a hands-on tool for learning?
Yeah. So it's part of my investigation theory class, and it's a web application. It's kind of like a sim, in that the idea is you get an alert and you investigate it with evidence sources and build a timeline. But it's not designed for production. It's actually designed specifically for learning.
Right.
So you have to ask it questions. It's not like Ask Jeeves. You're not typing in questions. You're clicking things, and here's the alert, and here's your PCAP. what IP address pair do you want to look for? Here is your host. If you want to look in the registry, what key do you want to look for? And you get back evidence based upon the questions you ask, but you do have to ask the right questions.
Okay,
You
like a
can't just
text-based adventure game.
kind of. And it's. I want it to be very such. I just didn't want to give someone a PCAP where they know the answers in there, and then they can just kind of go at it in a lot of weird ways.
Right.
There's very specific ways you have to get to the answers in this thing, and it's designed to make you fail. You submit an answer. Did something bad happen? Yes or no? And if so, what IPs were involved? And they have different failure points throughout them. And the idea is someone's going to submit it, they realize they missed something. Then they get an output of every investigation step they took. Here's where you went to the PCAP. Here's what you searched for. Here's where you went to the registry. Here's what you searched for. So then you can go back and look at that. Look at your timeline. Look at that. Where are the gaps? Where else could I go? What other changes can I make?
Right.
So it interactively gives you an ability to do the investigation and then go back and review it and continually fail until you get to the point where you figured everything out. Not a lot of situations in the real world where you can do that, where you get an opportunity to fail and go back and readdress without something really bad happening.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
So it's purpose built just for that.
Very cool. So honeypots, what is it? Why do I want one?
Well, a honeypot holds honey, which is
I'm Winnie the Pooh.
So honeypots, word's been around a really long time. A lot of baggage to honeypots. For most people, I think they think of a honeypot as a piece of software or a vulnerable system that you put outside your firewall and you let stuff poke at it and you look at the packets or the data or whatever for research purposes. You collect the malware. That is a use for honeypots. It is an interesting one. It is not one that has very much production or business organizational value.
Right.
So my focus and what I wrote the new book about was the concept of an intrusion detection honeypot, which is not super new, but it's still not caught on very well, I think, because of the baggage the term honeypot has. The idea of intrusion detection honeypot is it is placed inside the network. So it's inside the network, close to where either attackers are most likely to get onto your network. So maybe near web-facing infrastructure, but still inside the firewall, or close to end-user workstations, or it's close to your sensitive assets. But it is very, very scaled down. Yeah. It is not necessarily intentionally vulnerable. It's certainly not a super highly interactive thing. It is very, very focused. Usually it's a specific application. It's a specific script. And the whole idea is that nobody should ever talk to a honeypot when it is inside your network.
Okay.
If someone does talk to a honeypot, then it is worthy of an investigation. At best, it's a user who is doing something they shouldn't. At worst, it is a bad guy or girl on your network trying to break into things.
Okay, so maybe a canary in the coal mine type of, yeah.
Speaking of my Kentucky roots.
Yeah, okay. I remember when I don't know if this isn't exactly the same thing, but talking about this made me think of it. When I first got into Linux and I was just 100% in, used it for everything I possibly could, didn't have Windows anymore. And I came across, I think it was called Port Sentry. And basically it just listened on a bunch of ports. And if someone port scanned you, it alerted you, and then it would add their IP, drop their IP in IP tables or something like that. That's what kind of made me think, to be on the lookout for, I guess, attackers and let you know that something's up, that you're being scanned kind of thing. And there's another one that came to mind that I got confused, but this is clearly not the same thing. Is it called a honey trap? One that just meant to slow people down?
So that's kind of another use case for honeypots. I would call it a resource exhaustion honeypot.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of forms. La Brea Tar Pit's probably one of the first ones that Tom Liston made. Web Labyrinth. And the idea is that an attacker hits it and then it creates additional things that somehow tie them up, right? So like Web Labyrinth, for instance, I believe the basic workflow is an attacker will scan a web directory and it'll detect that it's a scan and will create more directories recursively. So it just keeps scanning forever. And unless it has timeouts, it'll just scan forever. So that's certainly a use case. And those can end up being detection honeypots. But for the most part, really the goal of a detection honeypot is just to detect any level of interaction and let the security analysts know about it so they can investigate.
Okay.
And you can increase the interactivity a little bit. Like, for instance, one of the ones I talk about in the book is Cowrie, which is an SSH honeypot.
Yeah.
And it'll actually, you can configure what usernames and passwords are allowed, and you can let anybody log into it. And if it's an attacker, if they're logged into it and they think it's a Linux system, they might try some commands and you can learn some tradecraft about them.
Right.
Now, a lot of folks would say something like Cavalry. Well, most attackers are going to be able to tell pretty quickly if they're in a honeypot. And that's true with a lot of honeypots. But the good thing is at that point, it doesn't matter. From the moment they've scanned it, interacted with it, tried to log into it, done any of those things, they're there. And that's really the value proposition.
If they try to SSH in as root and they get it their first try, yeah, maybe it's not real.
they're probably going to know, but honestly, I don't really care because I know they're there at that point. That's
we know they're there.
A lot of security folks would say, I don't want an attacker knowing they've hit a honeypot because then they're going to change their tactics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of those things we say a lot in security that actually doesn't prove true most of the time because changing tactics is hard. It is expensive, particularly when attackers are trying so hard to live off the land. There's only so much acreage to go around, right? You can't change a lot of those variables too easily. So
maybe they don't know how to change the script they downloaded.
Yeah, exactly. I tell you, it's an interesting thing because you think about this from the perspective as the attacker, and one of the things that helped me in kind of crystallizing some of these concepts for the book was I spent a couple years as a pen tester, and I learned a lot there, and I learned just kind of the psychology of what it's like to be in that state where you've got just an IP address a lot of times. That's what you start with, and you get access to a box, and really you're just hungering, thirsting for information that you can use to get further. And everything you see, whether it's real or not, you want it to be real.
Yeah.
You just because you need it to be real, and so you just believe, and you do this process of iterative discovery. And even if you suspect something might be weird, you're still probably going to try to interact with it as an attacker.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we can use against attackers when they kind of come onto our home turf.
Right. So as we get ready here to do the drawing, just give us sort of the high level, like table of contents view. What are folks going to learn? What are you going to take them through in the book? What level of expertise do they need to know, I guess, as well?
So you don't have to have any prior honeypot experience. Matter of fact, it's probably better if you don't, because you're not going to be as biased by some of the kind of the traditional research honeypot type ideas. Mm-hmm. A little bit of security experience is helpful, so you understand some basic network security monitoring concepts. But for the most part, I'm going to start out with a history of honeypots. I'm going to talk about the first one that Cliff Stoll built in the 80s, which is a pretty cool story. I'm going to kind of walk through that a little bit. Talk about why honeypots often have a bad name, why most people think of them exclusively as research honeypots when there's a lot of other potential for excitement. From there, I'm going to define them. I'm going to talk specifically about all those other types of honeypots, bracket those away over here, define intrusion detection honeypots. And then I'm going to talk about basically how to deploy them. So I talk about something called the See, Think, Do framework. The general idea is that if you can control what the attacker sees and you can control what the attacker thinks, you can control what they do. We control what they see by putting honeypots in places they're likely to access on your network when they compromise things. We control what they think by making them look valuable, those things that we place there. A couple ways to do that. You can either make it blend in with other things that are valuable or stand out from other things so that it looks inherently valuable in that regard.
Right.
So that's See, Think, Do. From there, the rest of the book is dedicated to specific honeypots. We talk, the first one off the bat, we build an HTTP honeypot out of Netcat. Very, very simple. You can run it on a one-liner, and then we expand it out to a bash script. From there, dedicated chapters, one for honey services, one for honey documents, one for honey tokens and credentials, and one for what I would kind of call unconventional honeypots that don't really fit perfectly into any category.
Okay.
So the general idea is, an attacker gets on a system, they've got access to your network. What are the most common things they're going to do? Well, they're probably going to either start pillaging that system for files, they're going to start pillaging that system for credentials, or they're going to start scanning to look at what else they can get to.
Sure.
We've got kind of honeypots for every situation, whether it's a honey document, whether it's injecting credentials into memory, which is a pretty cool thing, or just putting up, fake web servers so they'll scan them and hit them and you'll know they're there with that.
Right.
So,
okay. It sounds like you could also deploy like an infrastructure of honeypots that are focused on, I guess different areas, different things, make a trail maybe. All right. Well, let's do it, folks. Here's how this is going to work. We've got everyone who's entered in my little piece of software. I'm not going to show it on screen because I don't want to expose anyone's email address. We'll give you, I don't know, obviously there's about a 10-second delay. So I'm going to announce who it is. Please raise your hand in the chat. We'll give it, 30 seconds. And if no one claims it, then I'll have to redraw. Are we ready? Drum roll, please. Go. Okay, I I will do my best to pronounce the name. Vazrik Markarian. Vazrik Markarian. Are you here? Vazrik Markarian. That's not Marco, right? That's a different name. He says he's here, but is Vazrik in the chat? Where am I? I should probably listen to the live stream to know where we are. And if you're watching this video later, sorry, this is a one-time deal. You should have been here. Okay, I guess we'll do another draw. All right, here we go. Exciting. Take two. Claudio. That's it. That's all I got. Claudio. Are you? Let me listen to the actual audio so I know where I'm at. There it goes. Claudio. I heard his name. I said it.
I like to think wherever Claudio is. Oh, there he is.
Hey!
I think Claudio just had one name, that it's just Claudio.
That's it. Like,
it looks
yeah,
like he does have a last name.
Exactly. Everyone knows. All right, perfect. So I've got Claudio. I have your email. I will email you, and you send me your shipping info. I'll get it to Chris. We'll get you the book. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy that. Leave a 5-star review on Amazon. Okay. So that's the book. We're going to start wrapping up. I want to talk about you. You know, you're from Kentucky. I mean, we clearly have heard your background and where you came from, and the fate, the turn of fate for your life here. And you're wanting to pay it back. You're wanting to help others who maybe don't have a cousin or a brother or that's into meth that's going to get you a computer. So tell me about the Rural Tech Fund.
Yeah. So, a little bit more context on my background there. Some other parts of the story that happened around the same time is when I was in high school, I lost my mom and my sister and my aunt kind of all there together.
Oh, man.
And my dad kind of ran out. So I pretty much raised myself from 15 onward. So it was me and my computer, and that was kind of it. And I have no idea what would have happened to me, but fortunately, I had a few teachers who saw things in me that I didn't even see in myself, and they kind of helped me get to college. The school district hired me to do that job, which paid for college. And without that, I don't know what I would be doing, but I certainly wouldn't be sitting here right now. So that that always inspired me, this notion that I needed to pay that forward, pay it back, and help other kids who may be in similar conditions. And one of the things that happened to me was I kind of got out of Kentucky, and I saw the world. And I'm not super well traveled internationally. I've been a few places, but I am very well traveled within the U.S. And one of the things I find is that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And particularly in rural areas like the one I was from, there are a lot of kids interested in tech. And there's just not a lot of opportunity for them there. And there's a lot of kids who probably would be very good at tech, but they're not being introduced to it. So that's what the Rural Tech Fund does, is we go into rural communities and we work with teachers and try to give them the things they need to help teach kids about STEM-related careers.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something like a 3D printer or a group of Raspberry Pis or robotics equipment. We fund a number of robotics clubs, and we take these things and we basically just give them to the teacher. Sometimes they know what they want and they just tell us, and we just help them get that. Sometimes they need some help, and we hook them up with other teachers and kind of build this network and do some cool things there. But basically, again, just getting kids interested in tech. For those that might want to pursue it later, these are generally higher paying jobs that can also be worked remotely, and it can do what it did for me, which was end generational poverty. I grew up in poverty. I'm not in poverty anymore. And, Lord willing, my kid will not be as well. So we're trying to do that for others. Been a very successful thing thus far to this point. We put technology in the hands of about 100,000 kids.
Wow.
In all 50 states across the country. So it's been very rewarding. We've been able to do a lot of good work, and we're hopefully going to keep doing it.
That's fantastic. As a Mississippi boy, born and raised, that's near and dear to my heart as well. I've seen similar type of situations where I'm from. Well, what is there a donate button? What can the folks here in the chat do to help?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, number one, ruraltechfund.org. And the link is there, and there's a donate button. We're tax deductible. Not only that, we don't pay salaries. For the most part, it's just me. I have a few folks who help me with some social media stuff, but it's just me. We don't pay salaries, and my for-profit business pays all the overhead. So when you donate, 100% of that goes to the classroom, to the kids, and I'm very proud of it. Beyond that, kind of everything else I does feed into it. When you buy my book, part of the proceeds from that are going to the Rural Tech Fund. When you buy my
Right.
classes, part of the proceeds from that are going to the Rural Tech Fund.
Right.
So it all kind of, any of my things that you're associated with are somehow going to be helping that.
That's
And you
great.
can also help directly.
That's great. That's fantastic. So folks, please, in the chat, I don't ask anything of you on this thing. We're here to help you. Chris has come on here to, give his time to talk. Please go buy a book. If that's not your jam or whatever, please go donate. After this is over, I'm going to go donate on the website. So I encourage you to join me in helping those like Chris, who can literally change the course of their lives and their future generations. It's incredibly powerful stuff. So Chris, thank you for doing that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So let's wrap up. I don't know if we've got any questions in the chat here. If you have some questions for Chris about anything we've talked about, learning models, mental models, security, honeypots, the RTF, anything else, please drop a question in the comment or in the chat.
While we're waiting for folks, I'll also throw out another URL. ChrisSanders.org is my blog, and it is kind of the pathway to all of these things. So if you forget the URL of the classes or of the nonprofit or any of those things, and if you remember my name, throw .org onto it, and it will get you to all of the other things.
Yeah, if you Google Chris Sanders, I think there's some writer that comes up, somebody else that comes up first. So I do Chris Sanders packets, and I get it every time.
You're the person in my Google Analytics.
Yeah. In the last week, you've done it like 50 times. What's going on? Yeah. All right. So I don't see anything coming in on the chat at this point. We'll give it just another second. So what's next for you? What do you said you're in your doctorate, working on that. I'm that's a huge undertaking, but what's next for you?
So it's a few things. I'm working on my doctorate. My goal is to have it finished by the end of next year. It's a long process. I've been in it for many years and just a little bit left. So I'm excited about that. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from high school, let alone to get a doctorate.
That's awesome.
I'm pretty excited about that and some of the things that will let me do. Otherwise, I'm continuing to kind of build courses, build educational material. I'm working on an online course that will be released about intrusion detection honeypots. So the book will end up serving kind of as a textbook for it.
Okay.
So that'll be out by the end of the year. And yeah, my focuses are really right now on just kind of the combination of psych and education and security and talking about and researching that and sharing that out, and also just building my courses and teaching those. And I'm very fortunate to get to do what I do. I'm very excited about it. And that combined with my Rural Technology Fund work, it's a diverse set of things, but they all kind of feed into each other. And I'm just thankful to get to do them all.
Fantastic. A couple questions. One is, what are the 3 screens on the wall behind you, or screens or pictures or?
Yeah, so these are pictures. They're metal prints, so they look shiny and they look like screens. These are all astrophotography prints from my friend Matt Dietrich, who does excellent astrophotography work. I'm a space nerd.
Okay.
So I love space. I've actually got one. You can't see it right in front of me here. They're just various prints of the Milky Way and meteor showers and things of that nature.
Awesome. Second question. How important would you say college education versus specific security-related education play in these tech jobs?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. It's a big question. So I'll try to answer it best I can. College was very important for me, but I didn't learn a thing about security in college. I won't say a thing. I learned maybe a couple things, but not very much. What I did learn in college was how to learn to some degree, which is kind of top to what we're talking about here. And I really learned it in my World Civ class. I had a professor, Tafik Rashid, who I didn't realize it was happening at the time, but he was teaching me how to learn. And it was not until many years later when I realized that's what happened. And, I think college is a beautiful thing because there's few times in your life where you will be in a place where you are surrounded by people who are dedicated to learn and helping you learn.
Right.
And I think that's a magical thing. I won't say college is right for everyone, but I do think it's right for most people. Now, if you want to, I always tell people, if you want to go into security and you want to go to college, security curriculum in colleges is not in a good state right now. It's very poorly done in almost everywhere. Not everywhere, but almost everywhere. So in some places I would recommend, if you're going to go to X college and do security, yes, absolutely do it. In other places, I would recommend you do something else and learn security on your own. So either do computer science if you want to keep it in the technical realm and learn security on your own, or even do something different. We have a dramatic need for diverse thinking in this field that we don't have enough of. So, do political science or do linguistics or do psychology and do the security stuff on your own.
Right.
And there's certainly resources out there to do that, like my classes or some of them. There are a lot of other free resources too. But we do need diverse thinkers, and college can be a great pathway to do that.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
generally my.
I absolutely agree. For me, it was the same. It was more of the experience, the life experience. And when you cross paths with those, just, maybe a couple professors that really made an impact on you, that you carry forward with you. Yeah, I would say certainly learned some basic technology skill sets and basic computer science stuff. But I mean, the real education on that I apply to my work came in work and outside of that. But, for me, growing up close, with my parents and then moving away to college was, a life defining moment that, some people need, some people don't. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. All right. Well, folks, we are at the top of the hour. I think this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this chat. I encourage everyone to go check out Chris's stuff. I mean, you can see, I try to talk about the value, not just in security, not just packet analysis, not that, but the approach to learning, the mental models. I think those are incredibly important. So go check his things out, get his new book, make a donation to the Rural Tech Fund. We appreciate you being here. Chris, thanks a lot. I've enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me, brother.
And we will catch you guys on the next live stream.